everyone. My name is Alice, and this is Amos. I'm the youth and young adult worker here at westroad.online.church, and normally on a Monday morning we do a devotional on Instagram Live. But this week we're going to have just an open and honest conversation with our wonderful Amos Owen. And Amos and I are going to be talking about something really important, something that's kind of exploded in the news recently after the death of George Floyd, a horrible event that many of us have watched and seen pictures of over and over again. And we're seeing and hearing more and more stories of injustice and of racism, not only in America, but in the UK and all around the world. And I just really want to have an honest conversation about racism. And I don't know about you, but if I'm honest, I get a bit scared and a bit worried about speaking about this because I feel like I'm going to say the wrong thing, and if I'm honest, I haven't really spoken about it that much before. Not because I don't care. Racism is an awful thing that should not still be an issue in 2020, but because I haven't really seen it, or maybe I've just chosen not to see it, and so I haven't spoken up that much about it. But today I want to invite Amos to share his thoughts and help me and hopefully you to start this conversation today, to make a stand today, to stand up against this injustices today. So Amos, can you introduce yourself to our audience today? Who are you? Who are your family? That sort of thing.
Okay, I'm Amos Owen. I grew up in Ipswich. It's a lovely part of Suffolk. I had 3 sisters, and my family originates. My dad was from Jamaica, and my mum was from Barbados. And we grew up in Ipswich, and we were part of a family or a religion called Plymouth Brethren, which some of you might not have heard about. And the only way I can sort of describe them that you might give you an idea of the sort of religion was, it's a bit like, I suppose, a bit like Jehovah's Witness type of religion. So there's a lot of rules and regulations and things you couldn't do. So it was a slightly unusual upbringing in the sense of, in that religion in Ipswich, there was only one other black family. And you were very limited to what you could and couldn't do. So, like at school, when I grew up, I wasn't allowed in assemblies. I couldn't eat with other people, so we had to go home at lunchtime. And you couldn't do things like go to the cinema, go and watch a football match and stuff. So it was what I knew. So it was different. It was a bit different from other people's lives growing up. So we didn't have a TV or radio or anything like that. So it's an unusual sort of upbringing. And so I think in a way that protected me a lot as a young person growing up, from sort of probably getting involved with things that maybe I shouldn't do, because we were quite limited in what we could do. And also one of the other things it got me used to being one of the only black people around in certain situations. So I would say it made me very comfortable being around white people, because I grew up in an environment where there was so few black people, even though Ipswich is quite a multicultural town. And my roots are sort of Caribbean roots. And we had a lot of Caribbean food and stuff. But it was quite a limited upbringing, until we left that there we left that religion when I was about 14.
Yeah.
And so, well, I had, it was strange for me, because when we left, we were then probably more isolated. When you talk about being in a minority, the fact that all the people we knew were no longer in that we weren't allowed to contact those people in that religion. So it was an unusual upbringing and very hard to get used to. But my dad had a really strong faith, so we quickly adapted and started going to a Baptist church in Ipswich, and we started going there, and they had a really great youth team, a youth club, and I got involved in all that stuff again, which was great. I started playing football and just sort of get involved with things that I wanted to do. Sport was probably my outlet, really, I'd have to say, as a youngster. But in terms of sort of my sort of thoughts, my first thoughts around race and stuff, I would say that was probably at school. I would say that in my year there was about 7 black lads and about 2 or 3 black girls. So yeah, we were definitely in a minority. But we had quite strong characters. Out of us lads, we were quite strong characters, and often once I was allowed to play in the team sports and stuff, because I wasn't allowed to play in the school teams and stuff when I was in the other religion. But once we left, I started playing in all the sports, and quite a few of the other black lads played in those teams, and we were all pretty good at sport. And I would say, I suppose race for me as a youngster, it probably didn't affect me too badly. You know, I wasn't obviously overly aware of it, really. My dad had come to Ipswich, and we had worked at a local factory. A lot of Afro-Caribbean people had come to the UK and were working in factories and stuff. And he worked in cranes. And there was a lot of, so there was a large Caribbean community at those sort of locations. But because the religion had we weren't allowed to sort of mix with the Caribbean community in Ipswich. So they're like places like the Caribbean Club in Ipswich and stuff. I didn't grow up going to those sort of places because of the religion I was in at that time. So that, I always think my experience as a black young person was probably is very different to what other people's experience because of being part of the Plymouth Brethren.
Yeah.
Which is not typical of most people. So I always feel I'm sort of, I suppose there's an element of me which feels like I'm really comfortable around white people, and equally comfortable around black people. And possibly, I would say probably most of my friends are white people.
Yeah.
So moving on, I suppose in terms of, I don't feel I had that much race issues when I was a youngster. I remember stuff around the riots and stuff. They weren't, in Bristol and Tottenham I think that was in the 80s. I remember that being on the news and stuff like that. But in terms of experience a lot of stuff, I don't feel I experienced an awful lot myself. I think that I'm trying to think of one of the incidents. I think once one of the teachers at school sent me, I don't know, they kept me, I'm trying to think how it happened, because I remember my mum going up to school and said I wasn't going to do that, or said, oh, that was it. I think she sent me home I had to do some lines or something saying I shouldn't act like a monkey or something. It was something quite out there. Or I shouldn't behave like a monkey. My mum said, you're not writing those lines. Wow. And that was probably, I remember my mum sort of saying, no, you're not doing that. And she just wrote a letter and said, you're not doing that homework. I think I'd been naughty or something, or I'd been talking in class, and she said, you have to write 100 lines of I must not behave like something like a monkey or something. And my mum said, you're not going to do that. And I suppose that's one of my early memories. But generally, with my friends and stuff like that, I didn't you know, I got on with everyone really. I was quite
Yeah.
chilled. I think I'll probably carry that through my whole life really. So I left school. I left school. I did an apprenticeship in paint and decorating for 4 years, and realised that wasn't really what I wanted to do as a full-time career. And we'd always grown up living opposite police houses
Yeah.
in Ipswich, and they were recruiting at the time. They were looking for ethnic minorities to join the police, and I applied, and I didn't get in the first time. And then I now know, but I didn't know at the time I was dyslexic. I only found this out probably 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But at the time, the pastor of my Baptist church in Ipswich used to be an English teacher, had been previously an English teacher. So I did 6 months, because when you failed the police exam, then you had to go back and then wait 6 months before you could actually go forward and do it again. So I did 6 months of training with my pastor, and then I did it again, and I passed. And I joined the Suffolk Police, and I got transferred to Bury St Edmunds, and I was the first black police officer in Bury St Edmunds.
Wow.
And I can always remember that feeling like a huge weight on my shoulders. I know. I was always conscious that I remember thinking when I joined the police, before I actually got in, I remember going to see, there was another black police lady in Suffolk Police, who I went and had a chat with her, because I was concerned about, you know, what's it like being a black person in the police, because there was a lot of, you know, negative press around police and how they treated ethnic minorities. So, you know, it was near enough like I felt I was going into sort of what I felt like the black culture might be quite negative towards a black person being in the police. So I felt I could, you know, be sort of double-edged sword, sort of being in um, a, a service that actually black people looked on in a negative way, and also um, being the only black person, or one of very few black people in that service, how I would be treated. And that was one of my concerns. But to be fair, she was really positive about the police and how she'd been treated, which encouraged me to carry on with the process. And yes, I got posted to Bury St Edmunds, which probably most of you know is very, I would say, white middle class.
Yeah.
Yeah, compared with Ipswich has always been more of a working class town, and very multicultural. And I'd only really been to Bury once before as a youth, coming to Rollerberry. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Some of you won't remember Rollerberry, but Rollerberry was the roller skate rink in Bury. So that was my only experience of coming to Bury. So I didn't know the town. And yeah, so I did my training. I did sort of like 15 weeks at Shotley at the training school, and then you sort of went out on air. You had a 2-year probation. I came to Bury, and I had a tutor, and that was tough. That was tough, because I'd come from a practical working environment, and
Yeah.
because I always knew I struggled around the whole English side of things. I knew that, writing statements and stuff like that, that was never my strongest point. That was always something I had to really work hard on. I didn't know I was dyslexic at the time, but I always know I'd miss out words sometimes when I'd write a sentence and things like that. But that improved, and I did my best, and yeah, I got through my probation. I think most people, I lived at single quarters, which was, in those days, they used to put you up in police houses, sort of thing, which sort of all the people who were single, who joined the police, lived at there, which was a nice way to move out of home. From my parents' house in Ipswich, it was a nice way. Yeah, it was a nice stepping stone. Um, and yeah, I joined and settled into life in Bury. I always remember that I was very conscious of being the first black person. So when I walked around town, people would look at me strange and stuff. I mean, I always used to smile at people and just be myself. And I always remember that, you know, a lot of people with good intent, and I would say probably more the older generation, would often ask me, and where are you from? And I would say, Ipswich.
Yeah.
But it was near enough. It was funny because I had a conversation with my sister yesterday, and she said, actually, when people ask you that question, they don't mean where are you from. They're asking where you they want you to be from somewhere further. They're near enough asking. They don't expect you to be as if you're not from where they're from.
Yeah.
Sense. Whereas I was thinking, I am from where you're from. I'm just a different colour.
Yeah.
You know, you don't go to a white person walking down the street, where are you from? You wouldn't ask that question.
No.
Unless you were, you know, only in the sense of if they had a different accent and you thought, oh, they're from up north or something. You wouldn't necessarily be thinking, oh, they might be from the Caribbean or something because they're a different colour. It was, and I never found it that offensive because I just was pretty chilled about those sort of things. But I know other people could find that quite, you know, and it happened to me loads of time.
Yeah.
I used to just laugh it off and just say, yeah, no, I'm from Ipswich. But you know, I'm not easily offended. I think in my police career, I was always mindful that that because I think it was a burden of being the only black person, that it was. I was conscious of that. I wanted to make sure I gave a good example of myself, and people's. And yeah, I wanted people. I think there was always. I wanted to leave people with a positive view of the police.
Yeah.
And I was mindful that because people don't have a lot to do with the police in general terms, and so I was just first and foremost a positive experience, whether I was arresting somebody or whether I was, you know, dealing with them because they were the victim of something. I try to deal with people fairly, and I think that my motto was treat people fairly, and treat them with humanity, no matter what they've done. I try not to judge people. And that was my philosophy really going through my career, was to really, no matter what the circumstance was, you know, if you treat people fairly, however stressed or whatever the situation was, then generally you did get a better response, and it did mean that often you weren't in this confrontational sort of process with them. And I stuck with that really, and I think part of that was being black. I was conscious of the fact that I didn't, you know, there wasn't this sort of, you know, it wasn't like they could mix me up with anybody else. I couldn't sort of blend in and say, well, who was the officer you want to make a complaint about? There wasn't like this. Oh, it was that black officer. I know who it was. You know, it wasn't like they could have confused me with somebody else. And I was very conscious of the fact that, yeah, I think that was something I carried all through my career, really, that, you know, trying not to mess up, really, I suppose, and because you know, you were easy identifiable.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of race and stuff, I think I felt the things that I would say was that it was really things that happened to me, which I would say were just because I was black, were things like I was once on patrol in town. These are things that stand out for me. I was once on patrol in a plain car, and I got checked by the police, and I was on duty in a plain car, and they got checked because I was a black guy driving around town in a plain car. And I thought that's only because I was black. Another thing, I was in uniform in town, and I was walking around by McDonald's Way, and control room got a phone call from somebody saying there's a black officer around there dealing drugs. And I was thinking, whoa, what's that all about? What's that all about? You know? And it was near enough like I fitted some stereotype. It never happened to anybody else. And it was a real just odd sort of thing to happen to me. And those things, the only thing I ever put them down to was that I was just, because I could only put them down to that I was black, you know?
Yeah.
I couldn't put them down to, the sort of things that didn't happen to other people who were out on patrol and stuff. It was a really odd sort of things. And
what did they say when they stopped you and you said, I'm a police officer? How did they respond?
No, but I was in uniform. I think my memory of the incident was that I was in uniform, but they were saying I was up to no good.
Wow.
Nobody came to me. It was just like a report. It was like somebody was reporting that there was a black officer dealing drugs.
Wow.
It's just really weird sort of stuff. And I think part of one of the other things that I remember once when I was being, when you have sort of PDRs, the yearly reviews and stuff.
Yeah.
I always remember one of my bosses saying to me that, "Oh, Amos, some people might perceive you as being lazy, but I know I've worked with you. I know you're not. It's just that you're all laid back." And that was just more of I think it was near enough a combination of you're black and the stereotypical view of black people is that they're chilled and relaxed and stuff, and that could be perceived as being laziness rather than that's just your sort of cultural and you're just chilled and you don't get flapped about things and I always thought, oh, that it was interesting that person said that to me, because I always thought, well, I'm just me. But it was near enough like he was verbalizing what people might think about me, or what people's perceptions were of me.
Yeah.
And so I found that very interesting, and I think in a way it highlighted to me that even though I might think people see me in a certain way, they see me differently. So it's been aware of that.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to find out that people perception of you might not be how you think you come across.
Yeah.
And some of their stereotypes of black people coming into how they perceive you. So they that sort of they like their music, they like they like to be doing all the the athletic, those stereotypical things that you can think of black people that can form people's opinion of you before they even know you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really, it's been aware of that, because I always think when these situations and once you get to know somebody, you might not know. I don't know a lot of some people from different cultures and different things, and I might have a really perceived view of what that culture is like, or what those people from that culture are like. But everybody's individual to themselves, aren't they? Even though you might have a perception of a culture being like this, that doesn't mean everyone is like that. So yeah, I think this particular incident with George Floyd, to me, really one of the things that highlighted was it saddened me, to be fair. It really saddened me that another human being, forget about the color or anything, but another human being had lack of humanity towards somebody who's crying out for help. And having been in the police for 30 years and knowing the sort of training we had around restraining people from the UK side, I've got a United States sort of view, how they are trained, but keeping an eye on people if you're arresting them and restraining them and stuff, was a really key part of our training. And I think even just from a humanity, if somebody might have done something wrong, I always feel that, ultimately the last thing you want to be doing is getting into a fight with them or a grapple with them. That was always my last, I'd rather be able to talk to them, and I always came at it from that point of view. But I always thought, even those, not everybody came quietly, and there were times when you had to end up rolling around on the ground with people and stuff. But once you've got them restrained and stuff, there was a sense of, okay, let's care for them. Let's make sure they're all right. Because one of the key things around that, it was always around that when people have exerted a lot of energy quickly, there can be a quick change in their breathing and stuff. And you never know if they've got underlying issues. It might be somebody who takes drugs and stuff and all these things. And so their condition can deteriorate very quickly. So it was always mindful of, talk to them, make sure they're breathing all right, get them up and that stuff. And the fact that, he was calling out for help, it saddened me that, no one responded, nobody, and that, there was just like, they didn't see him as a human being near enough. And I think that really struck me. And I just thought, how can it be that people cannot see, it's another human being? How far can we be away from, how hardened can we be that we don't feel that actually this person's crying out for help? They might have done something wrong, but they're still a human being, and that, they have got emotions, they feel what they're feeling, and that you've near enough blanked yourself off from that. And it really struck me. And the fact that he was a black guy, it could be me, it could be anybody, I saw it as a really sad. And you're the law enforcers. To fact that if you have that attitude, what does that say to everybody else who's, that's such a negative precedent. I felt really compelled to sort of be part of the protests, the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And actually, it's really got me talking about it a bit more. Even just doing this, really, I feel like I've been one of society people who, racism is one of those subjects is really, like you said at the beginning, it's really difficult to talk about, and it's really hard to sort of. People think, I say, well, I'm a black person, but I'm not the font of all knowledge of racism.
Mm-hmm.
And having explained that my upbringing is very different to another black person's upbringing. I'm not. I don't have all knowledge of all different cultures. Just because I've got black skin, I'm not the font of all knowledge on it. I can only tell you my experience of life. For me, life is about caring for people, being kind to one another. It doesn't matter what color skin they are. And I've learned that through life, that it's about, if you don't understand it, and talking about things. If you don't understand the culture, the best way you're going to learn is actually getting yourself out of your comfort zone. And actually, we all like to be around people who we like, who are like us and stuff. And we feel comfortable then. We feel nice. They like us, we like them. But actually, would you go and talk to the down and out on the street and find out how have they got to that state? I always remember my career when I was walking around town on nights, and this person who I class, called down and out, homeless person. I got talking to him, and I said, "Well, how have you got to this stage in your life?" And he said, "Well, I used to be a teacher and stuff, and then one thing after another, I think his wife left him, and he started drinking, and before you know it, his life unraveled." And I think, if it was interesting that if you just go past somebody and just see them, they're sitting on the ground or something in the town centre or something, it's near enough like you don't really see them as a human being. You don't see them as they've got a family, possibly they've got a life, they were born, but they've got a mother, they've got, somebody cares for them. You just see them as, oh, they're just a pain. They're just begging, or they're just a drunk, or, oh, they're just a druggie or whatever. You just near enough don't see them as a human being in the same value as you may your friends, or, and I think if we can get beyond that and actually see people as people and, get out of your comfort zone, talk to those people, treat them as human beings and treat them how you would expect to be treated.
Yeah.
It then gives people a chance, gives you a chance to understand them. Not everybody you might want to engage with will want to engage with you, but if people will engage, if you're kind to people, the chances are you'll get kindness back, or they will, and you'll get a better dialogue. If you're prepared to give a bit of time and engage with people, your chances are you're going to get a better and you'll get to understand them. So whether it's culture, you know, they've just had a different upbringing, you know, the more you understand and get to understand where they've come from, it gives you more insight as to maybe where they are at this stage, or why they've got to where they are at this stage. And you tend to have a bit more empathy towards them and the way that people are, because we're not all the same. We're all got different characters and different personalities. It's just me door if you hear that.
Fine. It's a great doorbell.
Oh, the others don't like that doorbell. So I would say, the key thing is to talk about these issues.
Yeah.
Really talk about them. Watch interesting things. You know, I know one of the videos that has been very popular at the moment is that privileged race, that's the 100-meter race.
Yeah, and that's really old, actually. That's about 5-6 years old, isn't it? I've seen that years ago.
Okay, but if you showed that to, and I think young people are great for engaging in conversations, because they've never been brought up with a different, you know, I suppose I feel like when I was at school, it was near enough stuff was taught to me. Whereas now it's more of a engaging conversations. What are your views on this? What are your views on that? And it's a lot more getting them to speak about, well, why do you think like that? Why do you know? And which is great for conversations. So watching videos like that, privileged one, and then having a conversation with young people, you know, because if people have got a different view around it, actually the only way their views are likely to change is by hearing other views and understanding where other people have come from, and that they're more likely to change their view if my view was actually quite narrow. You know, I didn't really think like that. I hadn't really crossed my life. I had a privileged life, but these things didn't cross my life. I didn't realize people suffered in that way. I didn't realize people went through these things. You know, why, you know, that's never, I wouldn't have ever thought that would never cross my life before. You know, why somebody, you know, the way they talk on the phone, oh, I thought that person was white. I know my mum even said to me yesterday, she works in London, and she was saying that, you know, sometimes you talk to people on the phone in her job, and then they come in the office and see that, oh, you're black, you know, and then their attitude would change towards her, you know. And so it was really strange sort of things. And so I think by being open and people being able to talk about these things and understand that people do have views about things, and they might not be the right view, but the fact that people can openly talk about their view and how it's been formed, will possibly, by having people with different views, they're happy to, you know, if everyone's happy to talk and not be too judgmental about where people's views are, but more have come with a learning mindset rather than judgmental mindset, then I think people's views are more likely to change if they are heard from their viewpoint, and also you know, feel like their view is listened to, and that they are willing to listen to other people's views. When people clash, it's normally because they want to shut somebody down about their view and don't agree with their view and stuff. But it's more about understanding why people feel whether you agree with their view or not. It's more about, well, what's behind that. Why do they come from that angle, and what has formed that opinion? And if you get an understanding of how that opinion formed, because you know, people might have an opinion formed from grandparents who told them, you know, don't trust black people, don't trust, you know, people from this, you know, and it might be from a real sort of, well, that I was always told that, you know, you can't trust those people. Those people are always told, because they're going to rape you, they're going to attack you. Don't, you know, and that might be over years you've formed that from watching stuff on TV and stuff. And actually, when you actually meet somebody, you come from quite a negative mindset around them before you've even got to know them. And so, you know, at the moment when the news is showing things like, you know, black people breaking, smashing, fighting with the police, and pulling down statues and stuff, that's very negative press. You know, all the people that are doing peaceful marches, nobody's seeing all that. You know, that's not news. So if you've got a negative view around black people anyway, then that will only enhance that view of them. So you would think, oh, look, look at them. You look at the way they're behaving, and it will just reinforce that. But essentially, it's about communication between individuals and community, and you can look at the big picture, but ultimately it comes down to small, loving your neighbor, going to check on, you might, it's another, whether they're black, white, whatever. It's about all old, young, you could do it across all things, if you can engage with people, no matter what they look like, whatever their color is, and come with a more learner mindset rather than judgmental, and listening, be prepared to listen and prepared to ask questions, and be a bit uncomfortably comfortable. You need to get a bit uncomfortable. That's the thing. And I know probably in my life I've been afraid to be a bit uncomfortable and to talk about it, because people, I feel fearful of feel like I'm the font of all knowledge around this. Well, I'm not. I'm not the font of all knowledge. I don't profess to know everything about racism and stuff. My experience of it is very limited. I put myself in uncomfortable positions by being in the police and being, one of the only black police officers there. But I survived it. I did my 30-year career. I came out the other side of it. Do I think, I would have liked to have got promoted and stuff in there? I didn't. I tried. And it was only through that process that I found out I was dyslexic. I always felt that I felt more respected from the community, and I always liked that in a way, than probably from within the police. That was just my own personal view. I felt that the community respected me because of the way I dealt with people in the community.
Yeah.
I always tried to stick to those values, which I said at the beginning, where we fear people and treat them with humanity, no matter what the situation was. And I think, throughout all life, if you have that sort of mindset, no matter where people come from, and be mindful of the fact that we all like to be comfortable, but sometimes it's about getting uncomfortable, and getting out of your comfort zone, because it's in those times you probably learn more about yourself and develop your character when you're more uncomfortable than when you're comfortable. When life's easy, we don't learn that much about ourselves. But when life's uncomfortable, it pushes us to learn a bit more, dig a bit deeper, and find out more answers. And I would say this latest thing around racism, even for me, I feel like it's made me dig a bit deeper and be a bit more. You need to be a bit more. Silence is not the answer. Saying nothing is not the answer. Just because I'd rather not say anything, otherwise I might get it wrong, or people might not agree with me. Does it matter? Does it matter if you get it a bit wrong? I think it's better to say something than nothing. And I can learn some things, through this whole process. If I can learn some things, everybody can learn something.
Yeah. So in terms of, you've given loads of advice there, in terms of what we can be doing next, I guess, what advice would you offer to a teenager in Bury St Edmunds? You talked about how it's important to learn, to get uncomfortable. Is there anything else? Is there any, you've mentioned the videos as well, but is there anything else? What advice would you offer a teenager in Bury St Edmunds if they wanted to do something and get involved and support the Black Lives Matter movement?
I will say everything starts, we're not, you're not going to be, it doesn't matter about going out to London and being on protests in the streets and stuff, because you live here. If you live in Bury St Edmunds, this is your community. So it matters where you are. And the place where you can have the biggest impact is where you are. So sometimes when we talk about being uncomfortable and stuff, there might be only one or two black people in your school. Go out your way to speak to them. Find out about them, it's easy to stick with the friends and people you're most comfortable with, but make sure they're happy and they're all right, You see somebody by themselves, they don't have to be black or white, but just if you see somebody, it might be somebody who's a little bit awkward in groups and stuff, somebody who doesn't fit into your group. It's about people, but Black lives is highlighted at the moment because racism is a really difficult subject to talk about.
Yeah.
And so in this particular incident, I would say, if there's black people in your community, engage with them, find out about them, talk to people. People are often very happy to talk about where they've come from, their culture and stuff, you know, what their experience of it is, you know, of their life, you know. That's what they know. Your life is what you know about them. So people are often happy to talk about it. But often that will only come with you putting yourself out or giving yourself that time, or, you know, just treating people with that humanity and kindness, you know. You get to know, as you get to know people, more people will generally open up more, you know. So it's taking little baby steps. You put yourself out and be kind to people, then the chances are you'll find it coming back your way, you know. So I'd say little things, kindness around and being kind to people and just engaging with people. And I still think the videos things are really good. There's really good things online now around cultures, understanding in this country, understanding how, you know, how comes we've got black people in the UK, you know, and, you know, if you look back after the war, that that being part of the British Commonwealth, black people were invited to come over here to help build up the country again. You know, that's why a lot of black people came here in the first place, and understanding. And have a look. There's loads of stuff on YouTube. There really is a lot of stuff. You know, you can look at stuff and find out, you know, what sort of reception did they have when they get here? How did people react when they got here? You know, in their cultures, you know, and how the things they had to go through to get to where we are today. You know, it's not all about what's going on in America, because what's happening in America is what's happening in America. But equally, we have a history of what's gone on here, and it's understanding. You know, even from, you know, you haven't got to go too far back. You know, you've only got to go from sort of like the end of Second World War and once sort of 50s and 60s when black people were invited over here from the Caribbean, and you'll understand that these people came here and some of the issues that they faced. You've heard about the Windrush generations being very talked about. About a lot of those people came over here and then they didn't ever go back, and they worked in, you know, the hospitals, they worked on building sites and stuff. And I know my dad, he came over initially, he was in Bristol, and he came to Ipswich and stuff. And, you know, and my mum worked in the hospitals. So it's what they were invited to come over and do. But again, it was, you know, suddenly it was a different culture. People looked different, you know. They talk about the music. They, you know, they like their music. They like their, you know, it was a different culture. So suddenly you've got people from a different culture come here, and people found it, oh, they're not like us.
Yeah.
They're not quite the same. And that's when you get a divide and stuff. But actually diversity, what we know is diversity is when you get a richness, you know. And the Bible talks about diverse, you know, people of all nations. You know, no, you know, we're not all meant to be just keep to our own little bit. You know, it is meant to be a diverse, you know, and we're meant to different cultures.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Froze for a second.
Oh, sorry. Amos, thank you
Yeah,
so
so I
much.
would say,
Sorry, you go.
no. So I would say, yeah, just look for stuff online, research, and just be friends to people who don't necessarily look like you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amos. It's been so great having this conversation today. I feel like I've learned so much about you, which is brilliant. So I really hope that you as listeners have enjoyed hearing about Amos and his story, and actually how we can respond to the racism that we see in our communities, and how we can be anti-racist, make a stand, and do something about it. So yeah, we really hope that you've learned something, and we'll speak to you, well, we'll be seeing you all again soon, probably on Sunday if you're going to be joining us for church. But Amos, thank you so much for being honest, and yeah, love being able to catch up. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.